So I will open from hard drive. I would clone it like regular way, and you need to type npm install into terminal and enter, or just press button npm install, as usual. So I open MealPreference Angular because I cloned this in the morning of the today lesson. The today lesson in another section in the morning. It has branch main and it has branch simplest and some other branches. So today I will explain branch called simplest. So after cloning, it will show main branch. So now check out branch, call it simplest. Go to origin and find branch remote origin simplest and check out this branch. I'm explaining simplest for obvious reason. It is simplest to explain at this moment. And after this, these branches will reuse logic from previous version, so it will be easier to change, explain changes. So now let's run simplest branch and see what it is doing. So this program has two pages, input page and output page. Our input and output pages are implemented as separate components. So components can be used and actually use it as a page in navigation of Angular program. In Angular program, a page is not entire screen, it is just part of the screen. And even more interesting, pages can have pages inside. So potentially we can have a page and some navigation within the page by changing smaller pages inside. So if we compare this approach to Spring Boot approach with templates, it is far more flexible because templates in Spring Boot replace entire screen. In this case, it is not entire screen, it is part of the screen, and you can even go deeper and have a pages within pages. So how it is implemented? You create components per page or per sub-page, and in root component, app component HTML, you mark place to insert pages. If you have a pages within the pages, that pages that have additional pages will have app root, this router outlet in it. So as you see in app component HTML, this is my entire page, as previously explained. I have a header component, I have a footer component, and I have router outlet, and this is a place to insert the pages. It's a marker for place to insert pages. Next, in order to use pages, we need to edit a module called app routing. Previously, it wasn't there by default. Now it is by default. So when we create a project with checkmark removed, you know about this checkmark, I discussed it. App routing module will be there. So when you open it, you will see what is inside. This would be empty. So you need to provide description of what to show first, what to do later. So what happens in this array? So routes, it's array of objects, right? So I specify path, it's like address, and value, it is component, this component, it is component showed as this address. It is indeed address, imitation of the address, it will appear in the browser address line. So I say input component is mapped to input component here. Output to output component, and if you have nothing, like 4200, nothing, it will redirect to input. So if I click on this 4200, it will redirect me to input component. So you see, immediately it goes to input, redirected me to input. Although I went to address 42200. Okay. Next, our output component is its address output, and This means now everything. Addresses are matched top to the bottom, and if these three are not matched, it will go to input. So if I do blah, 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 enter, it still goes to input. Because, again, addresses are matched top to bottom, and this will be reached last. This means anything. Okay. As full, this is a little tricky. Previously, explanations in textbook about pass match. Previous explanation in textbook was that these passes are matched partially for optimization, and if partial match is happening, it does not continue matching till the end. For example, if there is nothing with I, so it will nothing else with I, it will go to input. That was previous explanation. And just nothing is prefix of anything, so this is why it has to be third, and it has to be matched to the full, otherwise it will be anything, essentially, because nothing is in front of anything. And that was previous explanation from textbooks and video tutorials. So this is rationale for put pass match full. Later I realized that if you don't put it, it still works, and I don't know why. It's probably API changed. So now I say, yeah, if you want to stay compliant with previous textbooks, you put a pass match full, but even if you don't put it there, it will still work. For some reason, I don't know, maybe just they changed API, so now it's not necessary. So this is navigation. And when you select something like vegetarian, it goes indeed to output. And this is bookmarkable. Unfortunately, data is not bookmarkable because this program is not saving the data. So if I reload output page, yeah, it lost the data. Why? Because by default it is using fish. By default. So now I'm sharing data between two components, and these components are not shown at the same time. Right? So I used a service and I injected this into these two different components, and I share data in the service. So for this reason, for sharing the data, I created service called meal data service or something like this, meal preference service. How did I do it? eng generate service meal preference. eng generate service meal preference. Enter, it created me meal preference service. .ts. It had injectable root on top. It means injectable everywhere, easiest way to deal with it, and it was empty. What I added, I created some object, and this will be data that I'm going to share. So I created class called user preferences. How did I do it? eng generate class, user preference. User preference, enter, and I got user preference class. It was empty. You see that preference is used as enumeration type. This is string username, and preference is enumeration type. So I need to create enumeration type in order to fill this line. Right? So I did eng generate enum meal choice. Press enter. And I got meal choice. And unlike in the previous example, my enum is strings for convenience. If you use enum that are strings, you can directly display it inside of template because otherwise it will be in capital. It's not pretty. So I use strings for convenience of displaying this in template. So it is by just, it will display it literally as a given string. So bottom line, I declared meal choice enum. I declared user preference class to store username and meal choice. And I store object of this kind in injectable service. In service, they're all injectable. So service meal preference service, and this is object. And I also create reset to go back to default. When we navigate back, I decided not to keep previously entered value, but the result reverse it to fish. So back to input, if I select vegetarian, now go back, you see it is returned back to fish. So I decided that I return it back to fish. Issue is that this program is not, this version of the program is not using forms. This is using brute force approach to enter data, and without it, we have to jump through hoops in order to make it work. So in the next lesson, we will look how to use forms, but this is not using forms. It's brute force approach. Why? I'm using it to explain other things. So it's, again, it's not short as possible, maybe not the best, but it's a demo of different things. So for input component TS, for input component TS, I injected meal preference service, and it's not public or private because I'm using this value only once. So I pick user preference from this service, it's an object, and assign it here so I can display it. Okay. Next, before doing that, I'm resetting this to default. So when we go to input page, service is default. Whatever is there will be displayed by default. When I display meal choice as enumeration type, this is required and it is inserted automatically. I didn't type it. Set meal choice is called when I click this. So it is dealing with inputs brute force. When I click on this, it's calling set meal choice. So in my template, you see on click on every radio button, it's calling set meal choice on enumeration type. This is how we did it in Android, right? When we click it on radio button, it was updating set something, right? So it is similar approach. And Angular has a far better ways of dealing with it. Android is too primitive in this direction. So, but this is imitation of that. On click of and it is setting new choice, setting the choice. By default, it is fish. So I need to match default fish. This is why I reset it, and reset is default fish. It is not two-directional data binding, although in the next version of the code, it will be two-directional data binding. This is not. Okay. And on click, I'm picking username, and this piece is called template variable. Sometimes in the template, we need to link pieces inside of it. So if, for example, I'm picking input, and I'm providing this to submit button, not to submit function, right? And so in order to pick value, I do use this variable, template variable, dot value will be value inside of this parameter, this tag. So this will be on submit, and it is called submit. It's called when I click on click event of this button. So as you see, there is no explicit navigation except here, right? In Angular, we can do navigation from JavaScript or TypeScript or navigation by router link. Navigation by router link happens after processing on click event. This is what I want. I put data into service, and so it is processing of click event. And after this, we navigate to to new address, to output page. Okay. And output page is relatively straightforward. I pick data from user preference, and it is here. It is public, so I can display it. So in my template, I display user preference username and user preference meal choice. Remember that meal choice is enum that stores string. That is why I can easily display it. And I have a go back button. It's router link back to input. So this program, for simplicity, right now is not using navigation, using TypeScript code. It is just by router link. Okay. Sometimes it's impossible to do directly by router link. We will see as next version of the code will use navigation by specifically calling TypeScript code. Okay. So what does it show? It shows brute force how to pick data without using forms. Using forms is more convenient if you have more than one input. In this case, it's already a good candidate to use forms. We have two inputs. If one input, there's no need to do form, it's just only one input. Right? So in the next lesson, we will have this program with form. There are two kinds of forms. One is this template-based form, one is called reactive forms. We will cover at least template-based forms at the next lesson, and we will also look at flower data example, because flower data will be an assignment. Not flower data, but something similar to flower data. It will be pet data in the assignment. So let's finish. It's time to finish. Questions?